Now we come to our panel discussion. So start off by introducing our panelists, and then I shall launch Slido so everybody can start to answer the questions. So first up, we have Aviv Leibovici, who is the Chief Product Officer and co-founder of Buildots, a company that solves one of the biggest challenges in construction management using an AI approach. Avi comes from a background of data-heavy cybersecurity systems and leads the company's product development and the relationship with the UK construction industry. Second, we have Natalia Voitovich. Natalia currently works at Grimshaw as a specialist running and supporting projects across the fields of computational design, applied machine learning, software development, environmental design, and data-driven strategies. Previously, she was a partner and senior engineer at Max Fordham LLP, doing project engineering and building of all types, shapes and scales. In parallel, she founded and worked as a developer in a startup called Animorph, building interactive applications for mobile, web and VR/AR platforms. Our third speaker this afternoon, or panelist, is Chris Pilling. Chris joined Fujitsu in 2017 as principal consultant to focus emerging technology with a mission to help customers drive wiser and faster digital transformations through the use of AI, cloud and blockchain. He actually nearly became a tax lawyer for HMRC in the early 90s until he volunteered to help install PCs in their Manchester office, which led very quickly to becoming obsessed with computers and a change of path in career. Subsequently, he spent the next 10 years at Microsoft, Citrix and Cisco administrators, technical and solutions architects. Right, so I now need to change the screen. So let me go through this and right. Okay, folks. So, not the right question. Let's try test question A. So here is your first question to have a play with Slido. Have you ever joined an online meeting? Pick all that might apply. Cast your votes now. $14 votes. There might be some more out there, I'm sure. Right. Anyway, we'll lock this one off because we've got more important questions to go to. There we are. 16 people have voted. 81% having breakfast. Some are suggesting they've been to the bathroom as well. Right. Okay. Thank you. And next test question. Now you can't see all the options actually on this screen here because I can scroll through and show you. But it'd be really useful if we can understand which is the best role to describe you this afternoon. And again, it will help our panelists to understand. Okay, I'm going to lock the voting on that one. So we have quite a lot of designers, unfortunately a lot of others, academia, software, clients, but apparently nobody in contractors or subcontractors, right? Okay, interesting to know. And our third question, what is your experience with AI or machine learning in construction? Okay. That seems like a good mix there anyway. So we've got some people sort of with a certain amount of knowledge, some that are quite honest in saying they haven't got any knowledge on about it, but that's really good. Okay. Right. So now to our first question. And Avi, hopefully you're ready to explain this one a little bit, and then we'll let everybody vote.
Yeah, sure. So this is pretty much an introductory one, I would say. Just asking to understand sort of how much do people know about the actual use of these things in construction today? Have you seen it? Do you know about it? Do you know what it's good for?
Okay. Ooh, couple more. Right, I'm going to lock the voting there. So, what's your take on that, Avi? And then we'll bring in Natalia and Chris for their thoughts as well.
Yeah, interesting. I have to say this is a very interesting format here because it really gets you thinking live as you're seeing the answers. But I'll say that I think this really shows, in my mind, that everybody knows it's a thing, but as we can see, most people don't have first or even second-hand experience with it. I mean, over 60% here I'm saying that they're aware of other businesses, but not themselves or their colleagues. To me, that means that while people know that it's a thing, they don't really know where it's used, and they don't really know sort of how widespread or not it is. And from my own experience, I would say that definitely less than 64% of, let's call it, the construction industry uses any sort of AI. So that's sort of my take on that.
Okay, Natalia, what would you perhaps say, particularly where it talks about colleagues are working with it? You're potentially one of those colleagues doing it. Do you think you're the 1 in 10, or is that a fair reflection?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, within certain businesses, there will be specialized teams which are working with applying those technologies into workflows, and then often the rest of the organization won't be included in that. I think at the moment, although I think there are solutions that we are using that have those technologies embedded in them, and a lot of people are just not aware that that's what some of the software that they might be using is built upon. But whether or not that counts as working with it, that's another question. So I think, yeah, at the moment, in terms of active engagement, there isn't that much of it in everyday practice, I think, in AEC, but there will be sort of teams that are slightly siloed that might be doing it. So it might be on people's radar, but not necessarily in their everyday practice.
Okay, and Chris, what are your thoughts as perhaps a consultant that gets called into businesses as to how you see this?
My first thought, Duncan, please, I just need to clarify, just for the purposes of the recording, please treat my input today as representing my own personal views, not necessarily the views of my employer.
No, okay, of course.
I'm hopefully aligned. The first thing that jumps out to me, Duncan, and I find it kind of disheartening because I spend a lot of time working with customers to demystify, demyth, and bring accessibility to emerging technologies. So the end of question one, where it says, but it's all still very niche, I am seeing that a lot in customers of all sizes, shapes, and industries and sectors. And I do find it disheartening because I do think it is now more accessible than ever to get access to tools and frameworks. As your introduction highlighted, Duncan, there's literally thousands of data sets now that are publicly available. And if you just bring that accessibility to people, I do find it very quickly can remove a lot of the apprehension and uncertainty around the technology. So that's my initial thought, looking at that set of results there.
Fantastic.
Duncan, are we good to make more comments?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just about to bring you back in. Yes, no, don't worry, we're not moving on that fast. I know this is all a bit quick help. It's all in my face, but yeah, by all means, if there are more comments, I will shut up and let you talk.
So I think, I mean, sort of continuing from what Chris said, from my point of view, I think it's about actually being originally coming from the tech world, not the construction world. But I think that one of the key things that I, as a co-founder of a tech company, had to understand very quickly, and it's sort of been an approach from day one, is that yes, the tech is here, or you might claim that it's here, and you have to take what Chris said, you might have data sets, you might have some tools already there and ready to go. But I think that at the end of the day, we have to, and I speak for the people coming from the sort of providing the tech. So we have to remember that tech is nice, and it's cool, and it's whenever I show people a demo of our product, they're like, "Whoa, this is crazy, and this is sci-fi, and et cetera, et cetera." But at the end of the day, it's about providing the people doing their day-to-day, their workflows, something that can really fit in and can really be sort of worth the effort. And if it's something that you have to work for 2 months to understand it well enough, and then will be very useful for you, then that's a leap of faith that is justifiably difficult for most people. So I think a lot of it is, yes, to develop the actual core of it, the machine learning part of it is nice, but to make it something that is truly useful in people's day-to-day work lives is the critical bit, or at least just as critical.
I suppose then, as a supplementary question to all three of you around this, then, how much time do you spend actually explaining to or finding out, from your customers whether they even have data that is suitable for AI? I appreciate for yourselves, Avi, you are offering kind of a complete solution that you will collect the data and then run the AI solution through that large data set you collect. But I suppose perhaps then more for the other two, do you find that businesses don't think or don't actually have data sets that makes AI applicable?
Should I go first?
I
think in AEC it's the data is not maybe treated with as much care as in other industries, and it's quite dirty and it's very difficult to use for this reason. And I think at the moment we are not really at the stage where we would be using clients' data. We would be searching on our, well, at least in architectural practice, and I think
right.
In terms of consultants involvement, we would be looking for data somewhere else, not within the client's databases.
Okay, interesting. Chris, is that something with construction as well you see, or do you think there is some data out there people don't know about?
I generally find at the moment I work with a kind of customers that fit onto a spectrum of data owners, and at one end of the spectrum I speak with customers and I listen to customers, and they have a kind of an approach of, here's a massive load of data, literally get your magic wand out and make things happen. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there is the customer that doesn't appreciate the fact that it has data that can be wrangled and manipulated and made use of in different ways. And then there's a kind of a group of customers that fit in between those two ends of that spectrum.
Fantastic, brilliant. Okay, right, we'll move on to our next question then, which is Natalia's first question. And here it is. Natalia, I'll let you explain yours.
Yeah, so these are just some examples of AI/ML workflows within specifically sort of design and construction stages for different projects. And yeah, I'm wondering, you know, which family you think would be the most interesting or useful, which family of applications from the ones listed here. So we are not talking about post-occupancy, and when we are saying site work applications, we are not thinking about you know, fabrication as such, more about aspects associated with BIM, such as surveying and you know, LiDAR technologies that still applies, but not necessarily fabrication.
Okay. Right, we'll let this run for a few seconds longer.
That's already very interesting.
Yeah. It's when you get a rush on one and it suddenly moves around. Right, it seems to have settled down. So I am going to, oh no, running around a bit now. Okay, I'm going to lock it off at that point there. Thank you very much, folks, for your vote. So there you are.
Very
What are your
interesting.
first thoughts on this one?
So I think we'll be handing over to Aviv quite soon, because costing, phasing, and construction program generation are you know, very high up, and there were that was the choice at the top there, which, you know, I think is not as widespread within the industry. It's not as widespread as it could be and as it should be. So that's a very interesting point, that, you know, people also think that that this is a very interesting application that we should see more of. I think at the moment there is a lot of applications associated with generative design and information generation, as well as design information analysis, not necessarily quality control. But yeah, I'm particularly interested in what Aviv is going to say about the costing, phasing, and the construction program aspect.
Just before I bring Avi in, interestingly though, if you think back, and I have not the technology to go back and look at it, in theory we had no contractors actually in the audience.
Yeah.
So we had majority designers in the audience, and they still think that it's a site-based activity. Interesting.
It's a very good point. I think, you know, it comes earlier than that, because the arranging programs and phasing and costing has massive impact on the design, and if those insights can be brought in at the design stage, I think that is something that cannot be achieved in more traditional ways at the moment. I think this is where it can be very useful.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay, Avi, what do you think?
Well, first of all, there are also a few very interesting comments here in the chat. So I'll get to that as well. But maybe just to give a quick overview of where I'm coming from when I'm answering these questions. So very quickly, what we do is we provide sort of a piece of software that what it does is you capture your site with a hard hat mounted 360-degree camera. We analyze, you give us those videos, and we analyze them to understand design as in BIM versus reality, therefore what is done, what is not done, and how does that connect to the program. Now, the reason I think for me that we even went that way when we started, we had a few sort of directions that we could take the company in, just myself and my two co-founders. And the reason we went this way, which I guess plays well with the answers here, is that we felt like the one place where it's very, very hard to even have information, just as a baseline to start from, is the site. So in a lot of ways, what I'm trying to do is first collect the information I need, the data I need, to then apply a second layer of machine learning to it. Because what we do today is we have this first sort of bit that gives us from computer vision perspective to understand what's done, what's not done. Then once I have that, and I know that, okay, so these sockets are done, and this wall is painted, and et cetera, and I turn that into progress information. So first fix electrical is 50% done, and dry lining is 40% done, et cetera. Then that information through time is something that we're looking to then apply machine learning to again. To, for instance, understand, oh, if this is your current situation, or if this is the current progress, then when are things going to end and to finish, and are we going to be delayed, and why, and is this okay or not? A second sort of layer of logic on top of it, but we understood that there's no way to do that without having objective and accurate information going in. You just don't have that on construction sites. So the first thing that we currently do is collect and present that information. I think the main reason for that gap there is that we're currently even just solving the existence of information problem. The next phase will be to do some more sophisticated stuff with it.
Good, fantastic. Reusing the data. We always like to hear that. Chris, thoughts on Natalia's first question then?
Yeah, so, the thing that hit me first was the question that got the lowest votes, the site work applications. And it's interesting to me because it is an area that Fujitsu has invested a lot of time and effort into creating offerings around, particularly defects detection. And it's interesting to me that a panel of an audience of industry participants and experts have voted that as the least interesting one for them at this time, and kind of bringing in the context of the world as it is now, and not only the economic climate that we're in, but generally my knowledge of construction sites and of the kinds of physical artifacts that you're involved with as the construction industry are getting physically more challenged to monitor, just from a pure physical perspective. They're getting bigger, different locations, etc. So that was a particular interest to me.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much for that. Right, we will now move on to your first question, Chris. Let me post that one. So, Chris's first question, over to you to explain your question.
Thanks, Duncan. I find myself very often in situations where I'm being questioned, interrogated on the correct usage of terminology. And one that I'm perhaps most frequently questioned on is machine learning actually AI? And I won't tell you my personal thoughts and opinions at the moment, but that's the thinking behind the question.
Well, the votes are coming in. It's not quite as good as Eurovision voting, this, is it? Slowly creeping up to the, jump to the 34. Right, okay, that seems to be at the number we've had before, so I shall lock the voting at that point. Okay. Perhaps you need to ask the question again. I will leave it with you, Chris, next.
No, that is interesting. I would personally, generally, more often than not, put myself in that not sure category. And my thinking is, my reasoning is, that there's different flavors and different approaches to what we call machine learning and artificial intelligence. And the three that I focus on mainly are supervised and unsupervised learning with data sets. And then the third one is reinforcement learning. And generally, the very purist practitioners and theorists and computer scientists that I come across tend to say, oh, supervised learning is not AI, it's just data doing stuff. You know, it's that training a model to think by reward and punishment to behave in a certain way that's really artificial intelligence. So that's some of my approach and thinking behind that particular question.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to bring you now in, Natalia, because your CV says you do AI and ML. So what are your views on this one?
Well, I think it really depends on the definition of AI, first of all.
Okay.
Because if it is, I mean, there are dictionary definitions and there are definitions that computer scientists are trying to put together, and they differ, but it is a very much a field that is changing throughout the years, and you know, where we are trying to make the machine sort of do similar things to what a human can do in certain applications. And I think that you know, if we and in the past it was the sort of old school AI, the symbolic AI, which is very deterministic and sort of you would handcraft the rules. But I think machine learning is pretty solidly now part of most definitions of AI as a subset of the current artificial intelligence technology, and whether it's pattern matching or, I mean, I think, you know, in many cases it would be more of pattern finding, where you don't have a pattern to match. That's, yeah, that probably a lot of applications would sort of fit into that category, but I don't think that all of them. So there is this another aspect of, you know, when we talk about machine learning and AI, we probably mean statistically the things that are mostly used across the industries that we have contact with. So yeah, there are so many aspects to this question. No. I would be in the yes group.
Okay. Okay, interesting. So certainly for us, so me and my day job with Trimble, we see machine learning as a subset of AI, that you start off with the AI and then, which I think possibly will lead in nicely from what Avi was saying in his last question. So I'm just about to bring you in, Avi, warning on that, that might be a similar thing perhaps with Buildots as well. Avi, have I got that right? That you start with AI and then once you've got it, you've got the ability to look at machine learning?
Well, no, it's one of those questions you expect to be trivial, but comes in very interesting. But first, I'll have to say that I have to be on the yes side, because just on the off chance that my co-founder and CTO ever hears this recording, set him. So definitely the answer from me is yes.
We can bleep that bit out, or just put something over the screen. That's fine. Sorry.
And I think that the reason for me saying yes is I think Natalia put it in very good words, that it's maybe not so much pattern matching, but pattern finding, which is an interesting way of looking at it, I have to say. But I think that my first answer to this goes back to what I said a couple of questions before, maybe, is that honestly, I don't think that we should be in a world, maybe a bit controversial, but I don't think we should be in a place where the actual people in the industry, so people like our attendees today, need to know the answer to this question. I'm perfectly fine with not sure being 50%. I would be perfectly fine with not sure being 100%. Okay. The whole point is to build systems in a way that people can use them even without understanding exactly what they are, or exactly what they do, or exactly how they work. From my own perspective of Buildots, so we, the whole thing is based on machine learning. Analyzing the actual state of the project is based on machine learning. Analyzing progress is based on machine learning, and some insights that we derive from that is also based on machine learning. It's all from that, but it shouldn't matter, I think.
Okay, no, that's interesting. I suppose again, it's where I suppose a lot of these inevitably technological advances, whichever industry you're in, come out of the specialists, the geeks, or whatever horrible phrase you want to use, and then somehow become mainstream to the point that people stop using the term because it's just what you do. We kind of in this world of BIM that we're sort of progressing through, we kind of use that analogy of nobody says I'm going to CAD a drawing up. Everybody just presumes you're going to use an electronic tool to create a 2D drawing, and possibly we're still at that same point with language, that people don't realize it's happening all the time to them in their daily lives. Very good. Right. Anyway, we are back to our next question, which is back with Avi. So, Avi, your chance to explain the next one.
Yeah, definitely. This is an interesting one because I think that, okay, I won't say I won't give too much up before people answer, but I guess that the point of the question is pretty clear. People sometimes think about, in the world, about machine learning as, okay, this is going to replace jobs and be a threat to professionals and to their careers. So I'm wondering if people here in our audience think that as well.
This is looking quite good so far. Okay, right. Usually when I say I'm going to shut the poll, it then shoots up a bit again. No, it's settled down. Right, we will lock the voting there. So here we have it.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, I have to say that this is both very positive, but also, to me, not very surprising. And I'll explain.
Interesting.
Yes. My personal sort of experience with this is that because a lot of my discussions, at least early on, were with people not from the construction industry. So, for instance, just venture capitalist firms that we were looking to raise funds from as a tech company, they all immediately thought, oh, but you can't do that because the people, for instance, you're relying on site professionals to carry the camera to do the capture so that you have the visual data to analyze, but they won't do that because it threatens their jobs. And I think that the nice thing that I've experienced in the past 2 years is that when you get to, well, for me it's this site, but I'm guessing, and this sort of poll supports that as well. When you get to the actual professionals, they understand that these tools are being built for them, that at the end of the day, machine learning can be, sort of, some people see it as sort of magic, but all it can really do is provide information, maybe suggestions, but I think the answer number one is exactly it for me. The skills may need to change a bit just to be able to use the information, but the whole point of this is to provide information to the professionals so that they can use that and improve all the processes. Machine learning, I dare say, will never replace a single person on site or a single person off site. It will make all these people both more efficient and also sort of improve their working environment, maybe. Because it's a lot easier to work in an environment where everyone knows that here it is, this is unbiased and truth and exists, and we can, if you're the subcontractor and I'm the main contractor, here's the truth, now let's discuss how to handle it. Let's not discuss or argue or fight about what the situation even is. So it creates a better environment and a better process for everyone.
Okay, fantastic. Chris, so from your perspective, coming in as a consultant into the industry, what do you see here?
A couple of things. The first is around about 10 years ago, maybe a bit longer, Duncan, we had a similar kind of fear about cloud, and all the IT professionals in the world that were being exposed to this new thing called cloud went into fear, and lots of people thought it was going to do away with them and make lots of people redundant, and it hasn't. And I think the same is true here. And building on what Avi just said, I truly believe that the technology advancements will drive and empower people to better themselves and to build new skills and take on new roles and expanded roles. The second thing that strikes me is I am increasingly, and I thought this was I thought I was imagining it at first, but I am in the position now when a number of clients are saying to me, please don't use this phrase, please don't use that term in a document or in some kind of presentation or in some kind of context. And it is partly because of the perception and the management of the culture and the management of the fear aspect in groups of employees and specific sectors, because sometimes people hear AI and just imagine themselves being physically replaced by a robot. So this for me is a very big and a very deep question. It's a great question.
Fantastic. No, really good points. And again, actually, as you say, if you just say, here are some benefits to your business, and they go, oh, fine, thank you, we'll have a bucket of that, and don't actually go in and say, I need to run some AI programming for you to do all this. Interesting. Natalia.
Yeah, that's a very good point, the sort of human nature aspect of it, and the wider approach to AI. But I think, I mean, you know, from my perspective, I'm very positive about those technologies, and I think that there are so many gaps to fill. First, in terms of quality and efficiency in the processes within the industry, that you know, that's where hopefully AI and ML will find their place. First of all, and and later I think it will be, you know, just changing certain workflows, but I really don't think it's a threat to anyone within the industry. Although it is interesting, and I have also you know, participated in discussions where designers especially would be worried about, you know, how good generative applications are getting. When we are looking, you know, at deep fakes, for example, and then how in the future the designer might be, you know, sort of heavily augmented by algorithms. Although, yeah, I'm definitely not in this camp, but it is, you know, I am aware of the discussion being there.
Okay, I guess that's sort of somewhere between. Is a designer losing their flair, or is it helping them to get compliance?
Yeah,
Duncan, actually, to touch on that exact point, I think I'm obviously not a big expert on the design world, but to take it to my perspective of the actual construction world. So at the end of the day, what AI and ML is really good for is replacing sort of the more menial, obvious tasks that just require a lot of grunt work. That's where it's strongest.
Yeah.
So it means that if you're talking about flair, it's going to just leave only the flary parts. And if I look at my customers and their site managers, then these people suddenly don't need to walk around with a sheet and tick boxes of what's done, what's not done, what's 20% done anymore, and look at everything and measure, is the socket in the right place, yes or no, because this ML is doing it for them. That's exactly the kind of work that they don't really want to be doing anyway, and sometimes they don't fully do anyway because they're stressed time. And it leaves them to handle not this, but handle, oh, how can we improve our process? What can we do next week to do better and improve our project? And that's something that I think not only improves the project, but also improves this person's, you know, day to day and how he feels or he or she feels about their work and how productive and important and everything like that they're feeling. And actually this brings me back to, I forgot to comment on David's comment in the chat before, but the end of his comment says, can AI help the industry work better together? And again, that speaks to what I was just saying and what I was saying before about this idea of collaboration and the truth being out there. And I think that's exactly it. Once you have something, this point is something that I'm talking about day in, day out, that we should get to a place where AI sort of bridges the gap between the main contractor and his supply chain and the client and, I don't know, the future tenants and everyone, and the designers, et cetera, so that now you have the information and let's work together and collaborate together based on something that it's not he said, she said, it's just that. And now here we go.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay. Right. Moving on to our next question now. I think this survey is going to work, Natalia, but it might be... Right. Why does it say, please fill in the survey? Can you all see a survey, folks?
Yeah, I've got one on the phone. That's fine.
Thank you, Tom. Right.
Yep, it's there.
Okay. There are 2 questions. If I can ask people to fill in. Oh, I can see some votes appearing now. That's good. So apologies, Natalia. I can't actually show your questions, but we'll look at the answers when they arrive. Right. 32, 33, it's getting there, it's getting there. Fantastic. Right, I'm going to lock that and I'm going to try and work out how I show that. Okay. This is interesting. Why can I not see the results? I apologize. This is not great. I thought having a 2-part question would be easy, but it seems that it's not. Right. I am going to take an executive decision on this one. Apologies, Natalia, but what we'll do is we'll share the results with you after the event and perhaps have a bit of a chat and then we can look at the results. So apologies, folks. Technology has finally beaten me again. So we'll move on to Chris's second question. So Chris, sorry, over to you faster than we're thinking. Apologies for that, folks. With another equally small and easy question.
Thanks, Duncan. Yeah, slightly more conceptual and higher level, but what's really of interest to me personally is what do we perceive as the goal for this thing that we're calling artificial intelligence? Is it to allow humans to do things that they are currently unable to do but could do with digital enhancements? Is it to replace human efforts and endeavour? Avi was mentioning a minute ago about removing the grunt work very much, or is it a combination or something different?
Okay. Right. The votes are coming in. Give it a few more seconds. It's a bit like forcing people to make choices. You say, right, a few more seconds, and suddenly they all start voting furiously. Okay, we're at 30. It's held there for a bit. Right, I will lock the voting at that. 32. Okay. So here we are. Thoughts on that then, Chris?
Interesting, and this kind of leads off my previous question about the terminology, because 44% have gone for augmentation, which I'm encouraged by. I also believe that the goal of AI needs to be and should be empowering people to do bigger and better things that it's certainly in the workplace, maybe even in society generally, that they're unable to. So that is really interesting to me, and I will keep that in mind for some upcoming customer events where I think that will be an interesting message to take into different situations. So thank you for the answers on that one, audience. I appreciate that.
Okay, Natalia, I suppose, which way were you going to answer this one? I suppose is the first question, and then sort of what your thoughts are on the answers we've got.
Yeah, I think that would be my answer as well. I mean, I think here the definition that we would be sort of debating is what we mean by human, because
Okay.
if we mean just ability to solve theoretical problems that the machine can't do at the moment, or is it the whole human package, or what is it exactly? But I think in the most general sense, I would say definitely human augmentation is the right answer. And then we've got the reason why I'm elaborating is because the DeepMind founder, sort of his goal is artificial general intelligence, where you sort of want to get to a point where you are able to sort of surpass a certain level of understanding that we can produce as individuals on very general matters. And then you've got artificial super intelligence, which are all sort of subsets of artificial intelligence. So I think if you went into that sort of theoretical area, these are the things that we would come across. But I think definitely, especially in the context that we are in, from my perspective, AI is there to augment human judgment and experience and understanding, rather than replace or duplicate it.
Fantastic, thank you. And so, Avi, I'm guessing from your previous reply that you were talking a lot about human augmentation in terms of kind of that automation of the mundane. Would that be right, or is there different threads here you see?
No, definitely. And I have to go back to one more comment by David, who I swear does not work for me and is not making comments on my behalf. But but another very good point, I have to say, the goal of AI and any other tech for construction is to build with more efficiency and sustainability, surely. Yes, I would say 100% agree with that comment. And again, it speaks to me saying AI in itself, or advanced technologies in itself, that's not a goal. It can't be a goal, and I think it's not we can't treat it as a goal when we are the tech people, and it's definitely not a goal for the industry, because if I'm looking from my perspective, the CEO of a construction company will not pay so that the company is more techy. They will pay so that the company is more efficient and builds better. So definitely that, and I think the way to do that is human augmentation, because replacing. There are some. I have had conversations with a few, let's call it leaders of construction companies, not necessarily CEOs, but high-ranking people that will say, "This is good because I can maybe save on some work, on some management." I think that's not the right way to look at it, and typically those conversations I tend to be against that opinion, because yes, you might be, if you use some tech that might be able to replace 2 or 3 people, that might be first of all, I'd say it won't do the work as well as a person, but even if it does, okay, so you're saving a bit, but the real goal is to improve the process, to be more efficient, to be more sustainable, to be all those things, which is so much more important than replacing, you know, a few people on your salaries.
Brilliant. For those of you that are using the chat, apologies, I can't actually see it with the way I've now got my screens configured, but if people are picking it up, great. If not, we will obviously capture all the chat for after the event, and if it raises further questions, we'll pose those with our speakers and sort of create a blog post out of it or whatever. My final question in this one now, going back to Chris, I suppose, again, just trying to put something that that sexist phrase, the man on the street, the person on the street, or whatever the right way of saying it would say is, where would you pitch, say, autonomous cars in that augmentation, twinning or replacement, just to sort of get a feel as to what those terms mean?
For me, that would be an example of augmentation, for instance, Duncan.
Okay. That's interesting, because I wasn't sure whether it was that, and I wonder if other people, mind you, very few people have put down human replacement, so perhaps everybody else is more au fait with the terminology than I am. Fantastic. Okay, let us move on. So we are back to Avi, and here is your third question, if you would like to introduce this one.
Yes, so obviously I come from construction process management as a viewpoint. So seeing answers, I'm not sure if everyone here has an opinion, but hopefully understanding construction well enough to answer what do people perceive as sort of the problem, the gap, the barrier, as it says, to incorporating these technologies in the day-to-day process management of construction.
Okay. Slowly getting up. Right, I'm gonna think about closing the vote, because that gets the last few people voting. It's all down now. Right, okay, we'll lock the voting there. Okay. No time. Perennial conversation in the construction industry, dare I say it.
First, I will again go to the comments, because it's not only a comment, but also received 2 likes. There should be a "we don't like change" option by Tom. So I have to say that, yes, the answer is not there, and I think that's deliberate, because sort of people both within and outside the construction industry have this this notion that construction people don't like change. I think that's not true. I think people don't like change in general. Construction or just probably the industry as a whole, people are not unique in that sense. And the idea is that people don't like change not because they dislike it, but because it requires effort. That sort of speaks also to the no time to implement. Do you have time? Do you have the mental availability, let's call it, not necessarily time, to work for something, to implement something, to do? I'm assuming that a lot of people that answered the costs spoke not only about the financial cost, but also this sort of cost of working for it. And again, the idea here is that it has to be as the least amount of time, of cost, of working for it, for this change. And it's sort of again like the 101 of talks that I give elsewhere when I'm presenting what we do and why, is that you can build your tech, but if it doesn't play well, let's call it, and integrate well with what people are already doing today, then that doesn't work. Because you can't come in with your, hey, so all of you, you've been doing this for decades, let me show you. That's not the way to do it. This is how you're going to do it. It doesn't work. It doesn't work because it's too much sort of to take in at once. And you have to build it in a way that doesn't require a lot of time to implement on a project, doesn't require too much of people, so that it works on a project. That has to be the key, because people in general, but specifically in construction as well, don't have the time.
Yeah. Okay. Natalia, what do you take from a fair spread of votes there?
Yeah, I think it's a fair assessment. Just being, from my experience, the industry is being constantly squeezed in terms of fees and return of investment, and that makes any sort of R&D quite difficult. And it doesn't really allow people to put time and effort that otherwise maybe would be there to improve their processes. I mean, it has to be done at some point in order to improve efficiency in the longer term. But I do understand, that it is a barrier on a day-to-day reality of working within the industry, and yeah, I think that will be changing, because it is becoming more and more affordable and powerful technology that and that will sort of push itself onto the landscape of AC. But I think these are valid. These are valid answers, and that's the right assessment of why those things are not happening quicker than they would be otherwise. Yes,
no, I tend to agree with you on all of that. Chris, so are these the sort of barriers that you are facing when you're trying to persuade potential customers to adopt AI and ML?
Very much so, Duncan. And if I may, Avi, I would kind of summarize your set of answers to this question around how do I, as a company or an organization, how do I operationalize this new piece of technology, this artificial intelligence that I've got? And what I am finding is it's that question around how can I operationalize it? How can I embed it into my processes, my existing technology estate, my workforce? And that's kind of my key takeaway from this. And it's no surprise to me that 59% have voted for that time to implement, and I do see that as one of the outcomes of that barrier to accessibility that I'm seeing kind of generally as well.
Does some of this also, Chris, relate to kind of having that compelling business case of this is a reason to be applying AI or ML to a process?
Yes, and very much there's a time and a cost and and sometimes a significant effort into, first of all, analysing whatever business process you want to target that can potentially be enhanced or expanded by the technology. So from an investment perspective on, in customers, then that is definitely a big factor, perhaps even bigger than the time necessary to implement the technical aspects of the solution. So very much focusing on that time and effort to understand the business as it is, and to describe and architect the business that will be as a result of implementing the technology.
Okay, and coming back to you, Natalia, just thinking as well specifically within yourselves at Grimshaw, have you found that some applications of AI have been accepted easier than you thought, and others perhaps were much harder to get people to adopt, or is the business sort of on track and understands this is just something to do?
I think everyone is on board in terms of having to change workflows and strategies, and sort of hand over many previously very manual to digital technology, and I think in this aspect, it's going very well, and people are definitely on board in the wider sense. I think AI and ML, because all those applications are still, proving themselves to be useful. We are not at the stage when they're completely accepted. It's sort of there is an element of introduction and presentation that needs to be done, but I think people are definitely very absorptive when it comes to those technologies in my environment.
Good. Okay, and I suppose then coming right back to you again, to Avi, to the question. Do you think that actually, and it links with some of the other questions and discussions we've had, that if you go in and are selling your solution as a piece of cool tech rather than actually as something that is AR or ML, does that actually possibly give you a benefit, that you stop talking about the technology under the hood and just actually say, here's some cool tech?
So yeah, that's a good question. I think that my standard presentation probably has the word AI once in it, and
interesting.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And I think, again, the reason for that and everything we're discussing is that it doesn't matter. My presentation starts with, what am I trying to help you with? What am I trying to do? Why am I trying to do that? What benefits do I see you receiving? Some point in there, how do I do that? Oh yes, it's captures and machine learning, and yeah, okay, nice.
Yeah.
And what does it give you as a contractor? And I think, by the way, it's also sort of connects to some of the other answers here and a few comments about the quality of data or the return on investment or the benefits. They're all sort of around the same region, and I think that's part of my role, within this story of the industry, let's call it. At the end of the day, you can't expect people who have a very clear job description, a clear goal and what they're trying to do, for instance, to build the project, to worry about, but let me stop for a second to think about how machine learning can help me, or to go search for whatever it is, or to speak. It doesn't work. We each have our role in this little adventure and story, and it's up to me to make sure that people understand it, that people see it. That's why we do all sorts of things. We show demos, we give pilot terms, we do all sorts of things that are meant to help with that. And actually part of it is just, to speak from my own short experience, I have customer success managers who sort of, at the first 2 months of a project, go hand in hand with the project team in using this application. And these people are former construction professionals. Why? Because that's the only way that it can work. Because the only person that can truly, and obviously they have a lot of influence on how we build our product. Why? Because the only people that can truly understand what the correct way of using new tech and of making it applicable and very, very truly relevant to the process are people who, who were that process was their lives up until long ago.
Yes, and at some stage in that process, you are dealing with everything that's on that list at some point if you're not careful along the way. No, it's really good. Thank you very much for that. Okay, moving on then to Natalia and your last question. This is an interesting one.
Yeah, so I wanted to I was wondering you know, how people feel about the data of their companies, and that's both design data and data that comes in during construction post-occupancy processes, parts of the process. So the question is, you know, how willing would you be to hand over a company's data to a hypothetical common data pot? And the rules are that the data is anonymized and processed to avoid any possible NDA issues, and data use would be restricted and not publicly available. And I think the third restriction that didn't pop up here was that only people who would contribute to the pot would be able to access it. So yeah.
Right, yes. Yes, we found another slight foible with Slido. There's a character limit on how long the question can be. So yeah, so if you are, it's a project specific team that would have access to this common data pot. Interesting. Okay. People are still thinking. Slowly creeping up. Right. I think, right, we seem to have ground to a halt there, so I'm going to lock it now and very happily see that nobody is absolutely not willing, so that's a good start. Okay, Natalia, make of this what you think.
Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting, and I think I mean, I do completely understand why you know, people are skeptical about it, because data is a very very powerful asset, and you know, that's sort of that's the strength of a business as well, their previous experience, their project data, and so on. At the same time, in certain applications, sort of having the brain of the whole industry would be extremely helpful, and such data pod could help to find insights that, you know, otherwise would not be available for one company alone. So I think this is showing, you know, what's possible. What's possible is to sort of ask people for very specific data on a very specific subject in a very anonymized way, in a way that maybe will not, you know, will not compromise the value that they take from having this data internally. So I think that's probably what I would take from it.
It's interesting. I suppose I've just been thinking as you were talking about this, if we'd have actually put that in the context of a specific use case, it might have elicited a very different response. For example, if it was health and safety data that would prevent accidents and injuries on sites, probably people might be more happy to share it. I suppose it's I suppose that nag in the industry that there's some sort of commercial data being shared that loses competitive edge or whatever. Interesting. Chris, what do you think to handing over everything or not?
Yeah, following on from what you've both just been describing, Duncan and Natalia, what I find interesting is the concept of saying to maybe the industry or the group of companies in scope for this kind of thinking, would you be interested in building a common data model? And the reason we're asking that and the return is potentially, if we used the technology, and I'm imagining a construction site that's maybe managed by a big name at the top with many different contractors and suppliers doing lots of physical activity, and all these contractors and participants need paying at some point. And if there was a common data model that was shared amongst an ecosystem, and the technology could detect when a task has been completed and when a payment is due, and this common data model could be leveraged to automate or to remove friction and blockages with payments being made, I think it would draw a very different set of results, maybe. So I think it's a really interesting concept, this, and as Fujitsu, we are very focused going forward from where we are now on helping ecosystems create ecosystem enabled business processes, and payments is really one of the key drivers for that in the world that I'm seeing now.
Fantastic. That sort of feels as though nicely leading to you, Avi, that is there the option that a Buildots camera not only walks around and marks progress, but starts to pay people?
Well, first, I think that question, probably not. Why? Because it goes back to the what it can understand, but what also you have to have the, in this case, QS for me in there. And the QSs actually on our projects are very big users of the system, because it gives them the data, the information that they need to both make their process more efficient, to improve their result, and to, let's say, convince whether it is the supply chain or the client that what they're saying is correct. And so I think that's where that goes. But once, to maybe touch on this question from another perspective, I think that once people sort of get the benefit, then they're very willing to share for that to work.
Yes.
I mean, yes, people originally, when you ask someone, oh, can you give me your data and then we'll do something pretty cool with it, that's that's a tough leap of faith to make. But if you're gonna go and say, you know what, we have obviously a chicken and an egg sort of problem here, but let's ignore that for a second. And we have this tool that is based on this data pot, and here you go. Let's make it work for you for like a month. And then suddenly you say, well, but the only way that it can improve for you and improve in general, therefore the only way that you can keep using it is if you play your part and you share.
Start to contribute as well, yeah.
At that, I think if we were to sort of create that hypothetical situation and then ask this question, that 22% on the second option would be at 85-90.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot about the construction industry where lots of businesses are very happy to do something second, but they want somebody else to have gone through that pain of doing it first, understand it, fix the wrinkles or whatever, and then roll it out to everybody else. Yeah, interesting. Good. Thank you very much. Right, we are already through to our last question when I can find it, which is back to Chris now, with a fairly simple set of answers, but how about the question?
Thanks, Duncan. And I've kind of realised I've asked kind of subtly or not 2 questions here that are possibly contradictory to each other when you look at the options for answering. So please, I would be interested for the audience to answer on, do we have clarity on what we mean by artificial intelligence? And one of my drivers for asking this question goes back to so many situations now I'm asked or encouraged or questioned on the usage of terminology when I'm speaking to individuals or customers. So I'm just really keen, please, to get the audience's view.
We've talked quite a bit this afternoon now, obviously, about artificial intelligence. Do you just want to explain a little more about what artificial psychology is? I appreciate 18 have voted already, but it might be that 12 of those didn't understand the question and have honestly said that. Another
situation I find commonly is customers have the notion that this artificial intelligence application or system is like a black box, and we are in effect actually giving it the ability to think for itself, make decisions based on a unknown set of inputs or constraints. And it occurs to me that we are producing these black boxes, which we're very good at making to do something from a what perspective, but why, for instance, is the algorithm choosing this option over that option? So that concept of why does a model choose option A or option B gets more into what I understand as the artificial psychology concept, which is, you know, why has a decision been made, as opposed to what the decision is. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Right, I think we've finished on our voting, so I shall lock the voting. So there we are. We could be very cheeky and say you've not explained your question well enough, Chris, but I think it's also an interesting question nonetheless. What do you take from that?
You may have a very valid point, Duncan. It says to me one thing is I do think we need to be exceptionally careful around the use of terminology and the way we describe and the way we present the things that we're building now in the tech industry. And of course we have trends and fashions, and we create and inherit phrases. Cloud itself is one that came from dubious origins. And artificial intelligence, I'm actually, as I've said a few times, I think now I'm really being forced into being very precise around the use of terminology, especially when I'm responding to bids and when I'm creating commercial related documents. So it is interesting to me from that perspective that 61% have got that opinion. So it's useful for me to have that takeaway.
Okay, Avi, where do you stand on this? We've talked about terminology and just business benefits earlier on, and taking the techie speak out. Where do you see on this one?
So actually, I think that maybe the interesting thing that I can contribute around this, and actually a few other questions that we had today, is that my answer will probably also be don't know enough to be able to answer. And I run the product of an AI, I mean the product, the department of an AI-based product. But I think that that's sort of okay to the world, you know. Terminology, as Chris says, is what it is. It's terminology. We probably should remove that from something that complicates the discussions and the way too much, and just focus on, okay, let's not speak about the terms or about that, but just what do we do, how much effort do we put in, and what do we get? Interesting,
thank you. And Natalia, your thoughts on this as well, then?
I think you know, I agree with what's been said. I also think it sort of plays into the gimmick aspect of, you know, when companies claim artificial intelligence and machine learning when they describe their services, and it is muddled to a point where sort of we don't know what we are talking about even in very specific contexts. So I think, as Avi said, there is a massive benefit of just describing the application rather than sort of putting a blanket of, you know, very wide sort of realm of artificial intelligence.
Okay, thank you. Going back to Chris. Oh, I'm getting some feedback. Oh, that sounds better. Going back to Chris, in the chat, somebody's actually asked David Hughes, why do we need to know this? So you are now being asked to justify your question.
Happy to. And I'd begin by saying that I am seeing a rise and an increase in customers around how can we, for instance, explain what the AI component or what the solution is doing, and that's around audit and compliance, maybe with a view to that aspect. So being able to explain in a simple, in a understandable way why the solution has done this, and for argument's sake, let's say the solution is making decisions on the way a building should be constructed, or a particular activity on a construction site, and that might result in something undesired happening. So then the question is, why did the technology tell us to do this? That takes us then into the realm of, we have to explain why the technology did what it did. And a lot of my kind of work and a lot of the work I get involved with around not only what are we doing now, but what are we going to be doing in 5 years and 10 years time. When I'm working with colleagues from Fujitsu labs, say, we have to be really focused on maybe lots of the ethical issues as well around artificial intelligence. So it's in my mind a lot now around that, explaining why the technology has done what it's done when we've given it certain amounts of capability to make decisions. And those decisions are a manifestation of the machine learning being able to make what we call decisions. So that's part of my reasoning for the question. I hope that makes it. It's kind of, I appreciate that maybe not be totally relevant to the construction industry today. I pretty much guarantee it will be in 5 years' time. And I hope to see the relevance of the thinking now. And it's kind of part of Fujitsu's responsibility and thinking to be asking these questions now, so we can be ready for that point in 5 years' time.
Yeah, as you say, it's all, it sounds like to me it's all kind of linked around the why of understanding the context of what you're doing and what the implications, or for that matter ramifications, could be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, right, well, thank you very much to everybody for voting. Those are our 12 questions done. I think it's been really interesting. I'd certainly like to thank to Avi, Natalia and Chris for very gamefully preparing questions and then answering the results on the hoof as soon as they saw them. So I think they've done an absolutely fantastic piece. There is a virtual wave of applause now running around the country thanking you for your hard efforts there, but we can't quite do that.